Last panel, the last day of the last outpost. My name is Nick Davidson. Welcome to Games in the Classroom. I have a esteemed panel of guests who you may recognize because they're very wonderful people who are excellent at what they do, and I'm going to allow them to introduce themselves better than I could do before them. So take it away, Francesco.
Hi, my name is Francesco Ortenzo. I'm a National Board Certified Math Teacher. It's my 13, 14. Anyways, I have designed and taught a curriculum on game design, and I'm an avid advocate for all of these types of things.
Hello, my name is Jeremy Hort. I'm a National Board Certified Language Arts and History teacher. I teach in Federal Way, Washington. I'm also the Vice President of the Federal Way Education Association. I run the gaming club at my middle school, and I'm an avid gamer myself.
Hello, my name is Evan Hendrickson. I'm the student here. I'm the one that shared the experiences. I'm not as much an expert. I consider myself to be a gaming enthusiast.
I'm Erin Jones, and I'm the old dog here, I guess. I'm almost 50. It's just hard looking at all these young folks. But year 26 for me in education, I was a French immersion teacher, and my whole curriculum was around gaming and music. Designed my first video game as a 9-year-old back in the late 70s. Wow. And I'm just really passionate. I have a son who's a computer science and mathematics major at Harvey Mudd College. So for me, gaming is a particular passion.
And we've been doing this panel now for year 5 years in a row. And they keep inviting us back in part because I don't think they read the application I'm paraphrasing, in part because this is a topic that just becomes more and more relevant every year. We are here, myself as a game designer, these fine people as educators and students, because we think there's a better way to teach, there's a better way to learn, and the lessons that you get from the world of gaming are things that can make a better classroom, better students, and ultimately, dare I say, a better world. So, just a quick poll of hands. How many teachers do we have here today? Wow. So about a quarter of the group here are teachers. How many parents? Hang in there. How many students? Okay, so we have a good mix of parents, educators, students. Why do we do this? Jeremy, why do we do this? And why do we do this on Labor Day?
I do want to acknowledge that it is Labor Day here, and here in Washington State, we've got a number of our locals that are either still at the bargaining table or are already walking picket lines. So we as educators here wanted to mention that, show our solidarity with them, and hope that as many schools in Washington start on time as possible with a fair contract. So why do we do this? Because games make education better. Most of the aims of education in a classroom can be accomplished in a way that is heightened by the techniques of good game design.
So, when you're talking about a classroom game, you're a teacher and you're approaching the problem of a classroom game, you guys have all sorts of restrictions on what you need to teach, how you need to teach it, when you need to teach it, what test you're teaching toward. How do you find ways, how do you find times, how do you find opportunities to bring those to the classroom, both on kind of the low effort, I'm a teacher and I want to start doing this a little bit more because I believe in the idea, or as somebody who really wants to make this kind of a signature of their teaching career?
I'll start out. When I was asked to teach French immersion, I'd been an English teacher before that and a history teacher. They gave me no curriculum. And they didn't bother to tell me that my students were going to be tested either on the state test. And I knew that I'd be teaching all in French, so I assumed naively that my students would not be tested, which I discovered halfway through the year they were going to be in English, in a language they hadn't studied in. And because I didn't have curriculum, I thought, okay, my number one job is to get these students to love learning. And that's what really opened the door for me as a French immersion teacher without curriculum. It was actually a gift because I gave myself some leeway to try things. And I remember, I'll never forget that first semester, every teacher in my building gave me a lot of flack for you're always playing with your kids, you're always playing with your kids. And that first year, even though I didn't prepare them for the test formally, we actually out-tested everyone else. And I realized, I learned probably the most important lesson of my career, that if students learn to love learning, and they learn to trust each other, and they learn to fail and get back up in front of each other, that's really what it's all about. And if they can learn to really value their own processes, that's what gaming is all about. And so I would say that transitioning from the classroom into administration, I then gave my teachers in every building permission to game with their kids. And not to just focus on that test, because the test, as you know, if you're a teacher, is not what it's about the learning. And gaming allows you to focus on the learning.
So on the receiving end of it, how does it feel to be in a classroom where that's a tactic versus one where it isn't? Because you had Mr. Ward, I'm assuming you also had other teachers.
Yeah, I've had many different teachers that have used games as a tool to get across information. And it's definitely, it's great because it opens different avenues that we can learn with. Because I'm somebody who's more like, I learn by doing. And it's kind of hard to understand or like really commit to memory something when I'm just reading it over and over.
Yeah.
So when I'm like doing it physically and looking at it from different perspectives, I think it's definitely an advantage.
So like back in the mid-19th century when I was in high school, there was a lot of focus on stuff that would be trivially accessible through, my pocket connection to the universe's largest repository of known information. Like, how do you take this new set of skills and break it down in a world where the old set of skills are the ones that we, as people of our generation, were raising?
Well, I think that's just the nature of education in general is changing, right? Because we're not about facts or even procedures, frankly, because, when you use the quadratic formula, ask Google, ask Wolfman, it's not more and more education is about just problem solving, experiential kind of learning, just interactions with other students, and that comes out games are really good at those.
I also think that the existence of this world that our students live in, almost everyone is a gamer at this point, whether they are playing the type of games that PAX caters to, that they are playing Fortnite all of the time, whether they are playing role-playing games, whether they are playing phone games on their phone, just real, free-to-play games, or whether they are playing sports, that students come to us expecting the type of feedback that games give. And this is more and more true for all of them, no matter what walk of life or what socioeconomic status that they are coming from. And so by being able to tap into those expectations as educators and being able to say this is an activity that is going to give meaningful, timely feedback, we are able to reach students where they are better because they are already coming to us with that expectation for most of their experience.
So here's an assertion that I'll throw out there for you guys to be in favor of or against. Most games build practical competencies. Do you agree with that or not? I mean, from my perspective, I learned to define and spell prestidigitation because I played first edition D&D. I couldn't actually pronounce it correctly until much, much later. But I know a lot about history because I played Civ. Maybe not the order in which things happen, but the things that happen. I'm pretty sure that mine has got space in my but apart from kind of these concepts, like, do you agree that there's a generalizable theory that games build practical skills?
One of the things that we talked about before coming in here today is, for those of you who are in education spaces, all these buzzwords like whole child, social emotional learning, grit, resilience, and those are all things that can be learned through games. So it's the content knowledge, but it's also how do you learn to win with grace? How do you learn to lose with grace? How do you learn to overcome? How do you learn to push through when you're losing? When you're having a really bad day at a game, I happen to be a gamer, but also I'm a basketball player. And there were days when I just could could not make a shot, but because I'm so used to playing games and losing, I don't give up. And those are skills that are lifetime skills. And so I think we can get short-sighted and think we're just preparing kids with the content for Algebra 1, or we can say there are these bigger life skills that I think absolutely games are all about teaching students.
We're also speaking of how not just education, but the world is changing. Human interaction is very different from anybody that's grown up in the last 20 years and anybody that's a little bit older than that. And we spend a lot of time discussing that too. It's just kids don't have as much experience with face-to-face interaction as they used to. And it's interesting. There are different venues through which students will interact. But if we are trying to prepare people for careers where they will be interacting with other humans, they need to learn how to interact with other humans. And that's something that we need to pick up the slack as educators. And once again, games.
Well, I think that games on this are on two sides of the equation, because our students are coming in playing so many games online, playing so many games on screen, that they don't have as much face-to-face play interaction as they have had in previous generations. And so when they are interacting with people in a physical space, and I hate the term like real world, because the experience of playing a game on a screen is as real as being face-to-face, but in physical proximity, and things are going wrong, there aren't as many skills to fall back on. So as I said, that I run, not only do I use games in my classroom as part of instruction, but I run the gaming club after school. And so giving those students a space to play games with each other, and there are very few digital games that students bring, and I don't have the materials to do that there, but playing things like Dungeons & Dragons or any other role-playing game where there is this interaction practice that is with characters rather than them, it gives a mentally safe space to try things, to interact with people. This didn't go very well. If they are doing something and I'm controlling an NPC or teaching somebody to be a game master, then again, it gets back to those practical life skills that gaming can bring into an education environment that aren't accessible in a lot of other ways.
Do you think it's the focus on games and screens, or have kids always been monsters to one degree or another? I mean, the studies show that your frontal brain doesn't stop developing until you're 25. Like, you don't have fully developed adult empathy for a really long time. So what are you guys seeing in the classroom that leads you to certain interventions or objectives?
So one of the things that I observed, and I teach middle school, and I'm certain that many people in here know what certain middle school students can be like, or even most of them. And I was observing some of my students talking about trolling people online. And this really shocked me, because these were students who, in physical proximity to other people, were some of the kindest students that I know. And I just stopped them to have a discussion after class one day, because I exist in online spaces as well, and was talking to them about how human beings, when you see somebody's face, you get this empathy response, even if it's not fully developed, like it isn't in middle school, but it's starting to be there. Whereas if you are looking on a screen, you don't get that same empathy response. You're talking about, these are real people, and I know you were upset when somebody was doing this to you the other day. And these sixth graders had not yet made the connection. Wait, my behavior is the same as this behavior. And you could see them start to process something. So being able to just have that discussion, not necessarily about playing a game in a classroom, but having a teacher who was knowledgeable about this, be able to talk to them, made them look at something in a different way.
So, pretty much what he just said, but I didn't really.
Thanks, Gary.
But I did want to clarify the thing that I said earlier. I was specifically talking about analog games in a classroom, because when I was talking about the different venues, that's one of them, right? The same way, if you're communicating, in the business world, there's a difference between email versus a phone call versus face-to-face. Well, screen to screen or headset to headset is very different than face to face. So that's exactly it. And we need to get focused on each one because they all have their, even screen to screen. I mean, if you're Skyping people, we need to make sure that we delineate all of these different modes of communication and have them practice each. But face to face is the one that's kind of waning.
I wanted to add that as a mom, my kids are 21, 22, and 23. I learned a ton from my kids at home that I was able to bring to my classroom. But my youngest one is Asperger's, and he's gifted, whatever the heck that means. He got one on an SAT, so there you have it. My oldest one is severely dysgraphic. So school for him was a nightmare. He was called stupid by his second grade teacher, and then again at 8th grade, and again in his senior year of high school. So the two of them have really polar opposite academic experiences, and then my daughter was adopted out of a game family, so she comes to us with some PTSD. And what I'll say about games for my kids, when the five of us, my husband is a teacher, and I and our kids would play games, if it was a really academic, intellectual game, our youngest one did really well, but he had to learn in that process how to be gracious with his siblings who didn't always catch on as quickly and couldn't respond as quickly. But my older one, who didn't do well in school, has a really great memory. And so games gave each of my kids different ways, and we would choose as a family to play games that advantaged one of the kids at different times. And so both of us being teachers, we were really intentional even at home about how we played games and how we taught our kids. Because my youngest one with Asperger's, I don't know if you've ever been around someone with Asperger's, but they're not always such gracious winners. He informed me when he was 12, Mom, I'm smarter than you. And I said at the time, I'm 6 feet tall. I said, well, buddy, I'm bigger than you though. Well, now he's 6'4". So, unfortunately, he's a gentle giant, but he had to learn how to be gracious and winning. Because he wasn't always. And what's beautiful now as a college student is I would say he's developed. He's 21 now, so his whole demeanor has changed and how he talks about himself and his intelligence has changed. But a lot of that happened around the kitchen table, around the dining room table, around tables at restaurants where we had conversations. That is probably not the best way to say what you just said. And games provide those opportunities right in the moment to have those conversations.
So moving a little bit from kind of the why to the what, can you guys talk about some of the specific games that you run in classrooms in a little bit of detail to give a sense of like what your solutions to this problem look like?
Okay, so of the games that I've played, most of them were in this classroom. One of them I remember was, I believe, 10th grade history. We were reviewing everything that led up to World War I. And so, like I said before, it's one thing to read something and then read it again and then read it again. But it's another thing to take it and look at it from a different perspective. So what we were doing is we were looking at like the couple different reasons that World War I was started, would be that Allies or the grab for land or whatever. And so basically what we did is we did a bunch of different simulations, and for some reason this really set it in my brain. This is how it happened, and this is why I saw it a certain way, and it's just different, and I think it really works.
So each teacher that starts getting into games in their classroom gets in a slightly different way because they're all slightly different backgrounds. So I started off because most teachers start off reviewing for tests playing some variety of Jeopardy, which is a great starting point. But after a couple of years, I was starting to get really bored with Jeopardy. And so in my 6th grade history class, I started designing custom review games for each history unit that we were going through. And it was not all at once. I've got way more in my tool bag now than I've ever had before because I keep designing more year after year. But my goal was that by playing the game in class, when we were reviewing for a test, students would learn something about the civilization we were studying by playing the game. So if we're studying ancient Mesopotamian history, the start of cities, which is one of the things. But what I really want them to know is that we're defining civilization in 6th grade in a society that has a high degree of organization in government, belief structure, and trade, and we have a game in which they are, by answering questions that will be on the test, to advance their group's civilization, one of those 3 areas. When they get to the test, that's something that they can remember because, as Evan said, it's something that they can experience. So I designed a lot of games for my class. I also go and purchase a lot of games and adapt them for my classroom. I come to PAX to look for them. I'm going to give a plug to a company that I had no idea was making a game until I was here on Saturday. On the 6th floor of the convention center, there is a game that's on Kickstarter now called Pitch Storm. If you want information about it, I've got it here. And I borrowed some of their prototype so that I could come talk about it. It is a game about pitching movie ideas, and there are characters and plots, and you have to put them together. And I'm really excited to get back to my 6th graders and go, you get to pick one of these 3 characters, you get assigned a random plot, and in the game that they are pitching, or that they've got on Kickstarter or there, it's sort of an apples-to-apples type judging game. It's going to be turning into a quick write in my classroom so that we're going to have that game thing in there, but going and adapting a lot of these games that I have found as well, things like Taboo that I brought into my language arts classroom. So whether it's designing or getting published games and adapting them, there's lots of ways to bring things in depending on your comfort level.
So one of the things in game design, especially if you're designing for a classroom, you want to make sure that the game is engaging the students and motivating them because of the content, and not just the motivation is just complicity, like compliance. You don't want them to just like, okay, this makes this pill a little easier to swallow. I will do my times tables. You don't want that. And one of the ways to do that is, especially looking at your content, let that flavor the mechanics, let that drive how it goes, and make it lead to students making interesting choices that are not completely straightforward. Otherwise, every game turns into Candyland or Jeopardy, and neither of those is really fun after a while, or at all in the case of Candyland. But that's, like a simple example I'll use when I'm teaching my game design class is if, maybe if it's like a vaguely fantasy wish-themed game, somebody might turn into a toad. Maybe they lose other things that they might have been able to do, but maybe it allows them to move in a particular way that might have good aspects to it, like hopping over bad spaces or something like that.
If you have not read this book by Jane McGonigal, it's called Reality is Broken, I would highly recommend this book. Her definition of a game is the one that I use most when I'm thinking about something for my classroom, which is playing a game is a voluntary attempt to overcome unnecessary obstacles. And one of the key mistakes that I made when I was first starting to get into games in my classroom was overlooking that word voluntary. That you cannot be forced to play a game especially in a classroom, if it is not a voluntary, it's not a choice the student makes, then it's not a game, it's a really convoluted assignment. So if you're one of the educators in this room, every game that you play in your classroom has to be voluntary. And I always give students choice if they're playing or not. And it doesn't have to be equal choice. Oftentimes if we're using it for review, you can play this game with us, which is going to accomplish the goal that I want. Or you can do the practice test again. And I don't have students often make that choice, but sometimes I do, and they need to have that venue. You don't know whether they're tapped out on social interaction for that day, whether there's something in their home life or their personal life that is just like they can't be part of that heightened engagement of a game. And if you force them to do it, you're going to make everything else you're trying to do weaker in your classroom. So always making sure that anything you're doing in a classroom game-wise is voluntary or it's not a game.
So my dad was a computer teacher back in the 70s, and I'll never forget when the giant supercomputer became obsolete. He decided to take it apart with my brother and we brought the innards of the computer home. And my dad encouraged me to make a game out of it, so I made mazes out of it and all this stuff. So fast forward about 20 years when I was teaching in Tacoma, I taught in a Title I building. I had $100 to buy supplies every year. Did not have
Barely.
3 small children. My husband was a youth pastor. Like, we had no money. So I would go and buy games at Goodwill. Didn't matter if all the pieces were there or not, because it was just tools. And so what I would do is my students would be broken up into teams, and I would give them content. So as we're learning a new content, I'd give them a set of vocabulary or terminology or problems I wanted them to solve. And they had to decide, do we want to make a board game, a card game? They got to drive that. There is nothing better than students creating their own game and then having to teach other students. And what I found is we would have game nights then and invite families to come. And I worked in a Title I building where families never came. 90% of my kids' families showed up because the kids were so excited about their games, and parents always want to celebrate their kids. I don't care who the parents are. And so that was what we ended up doing for every parent-teacher conference. My students would create a game, and they would show off their game, and that was part of their parent-teacher conference.
That's cool.
One of my favorite examples was one that you told me about, Jeremy, about the countries that were trading with one another with facts on the back. I could probably hear the story. What's your story?
So this was a simulation that I was running in a classroom, and this is something that I forget. It was not a game that I designed. It was one that I found on the internet, and I'm trying to give appropriate credit for it, but I don't remember where I got it. So apologies to that. But I was trying to get students to understand cultural confusion of ideas moving across different cultures. And so they had different cards with resources on the front of them. And the things on the back were long sentences that my 6th graders didn't care about because the game was all about the resources. And each civilization in the ancient world had a different resource. And they were, so it could have been Egypt, it could have been Greece, it could have been the Hittites, it could have been the Babylonians, there was Chinese, there was the Indus Valley civilization, there were the ancient Maya, there were the Olmecs, there were civilizations all over the world, and there were, the cards were on different colors. And so their goal was to get as many packets of resources as possible of one of each resource. And so they had to go through, and they were each table group had to trade with the other ones to get other resources. There were certain rules, like if you had a resource printed on a white card, you could not trade it for a resource that was printed on a yellow card. And I was controlling the ones on the blue cards, which was ancient Chinese civilization. And so they went through and did all of this trading, trying to get the most resource packets. And so they thought that that was the game. We talked about that. We talked about who won. And the next thing I gave them was it wasn't a quiz, but it was a list of questions because it wasn't going to be graded, but it was about questions about every civilization that was not theirs. And on the back of any resource, so any, say, the wheat that came from Egypt, there were small facts about the Egyptian civilization. On the corn that was coming from the ancient Olmec, that there was facts about them. And so by turning the cards over, they were then able to see that trade was causing cultural confusion, cultural contact, and then we talked about why the Mesoamerican, South American, and North American civilizations didn't have any information about the civilizations in Afro-Eurasia, and why this information about the Chinese civilization was rarer in the European and African civilizations. And so there was emergent learning that came from playing this game that my 6th graders that year got that concept of information and cultural contact spreading through trade in a way that they had never gotten it before when we had just read about it.
Awesome.
So we touched on this a little bit, and this is jumping topics a little bit, but in the 15-ish years of Pokemon anime, Ash always loses.
anything requires practice. And if the only opportunity students have to fail is that one high-stakes test a year, there's just no way to overcome that. And so I think the beauty of gaming, the beauty of sports is that you get to practice failure every day. It's just always, I was a high-level basketball player, tried out for 2 WNBA teams. I have a ton of friends that play in the NFL, that played in the NBA. Not one of them has ever not lost. Every single, even the greatest athletes have lost. And I think that's actually the greatest skill of being an athlete is that I learned how to lose really well. And I learned how to get back up. And I think that's the beauty of gaming, is that you are never going to win all the time. And I think that's a really great lesson. And it's a lesson that can only be learned when you have the opportunity to lose often and at much lower stakes. And so I think gaming provides this great opportunity for us to help our students practice in a safe environment. That losing is not the end. It's either a change of direction or it's an opportunity to learn and grow.
One of the things that I kind of like about the current generation of Battle Royale games is that when you're 1 versus 99, you don't have an expectation every time. Like you have an expectation of loss. Like Jeremy and I are also Kenjutsu instructors. We teach martial arts. And when you're squaring off against somebody with another sword, it's like, oh, one person, one sword, one sword. This sounds fair, and it never is. So when you get beat in a scenario where you have an expectation or a reasonable expectation of success, that's demoralizing. When you lose in a scenario where you don't have necessarily a 50-50 expectation of success, I think that's a different sort of experience.
Okay. Well, I mean, even when it's not, I mean, one of the most popular games in video gaming history, you have a 100% chance of failure. I mean, I'm guessing most people in this room have played Tetris at some point. And you go into Tetris knowing you're not going to win, and you're okay with that. And with things like Fortnite, most of my students are playing Fortnite or know somebody who's playing Fortnite or have to sit while their friends talk about Fortnite. So there is this idea of failing with grace. One of the reasons that I really believe that games are good in a classroom is that when you lose at a game, your first instinct is to go try again. That even if it's 100% chance of failure, you're trying to get a few more lines in Tetris, you are trying to get just a little bit closer to that battle royale, you're trying to get your Hearthstone rank up to legend for that, that first time, and bringing that resiliency from failure into a classroom, that the response to failure isn't, I guess I'm going to give up now, but okay, let's go again. That's one of the great strengths of gaming in the classroom.
I didn't fail. I'm just slightly less bad than I was. That's the beautiful thing, is that it's that safe space. If done correctly. I mean, in education, you are also teaching through games or through whatever medium. Anytime you do anything, it's like, wow, yes, you won, tone it down a little. Or, it's a safe space. It's like a social sandbox where you're, helping people learn to interact and experience these things. It's also content, I guess.
Well, let's dig into that a little bit. I mean, that safe space is not distributed equally. Like, that safe space is not equally safe for everyone. And that's something that, as any game developer who's responsible for a community knows, there are different degrees of safety depending on who you are and how you participate in that community. I mean, I have been pushed out of toxic communities myself, but I know how much easier time I have had in online communities being who I am. So, we're creating these spaces in the classroom. How do we make sure that those safe spaces actually are?
Part of it, I think, goes to the voluntary aspect of it. The other thing that I try and do, and I've got, every time I come to the channel, I've got a growing list of rules that I try and follow for how I'm putting gaming in a classroom. Some individuals really like competition, others really don't like competition. Some people really like cooperation, other people would rather rely on themselves and just them. So if I am designing a game for a classroom, my ideal is that there is going to be a cooperative way to play it, a competitive way to play it, and I'm going to let students self-select into how they want to do that. If I can't get there with one of my goals for that game, then there is going to be a competitive and a cooperative aspect of it where they, in their group, can decide what part that they're participating in, and however they're participating in that is going to advance them towards my goal as an educator.
Yeah, incorporating both competitive and cooperative aspects of the game is great, especially if you've got, a classroom full of 87 people, and maybe not, but, if you've got all that skills like that. But, putting together in groups, especially if, each team has individual accountability, so everybody's kind of got a role, but they can still support each other while working towards a goal, and whether or not you're competing against the group next to you is up to, how competitive your group wants to be. That's fine, and then you can still achieve that goal of kind of appealing to everybody, I guess.
I also want to add that we talk about things like equity and differentiated instruction a lot in school spaces. When you have 30 kids in your classroom, what he's asking is really hard. And I think we talk about it as if just go do it. And that's just not how it works. I know with 3 kids at home. One of them, I could just look at him and he'd start crying, sorry mom, I had to do that cookie. My other one, he could have cookie all over his face and I'd say, Mel, I had to drink that cookie. What cookie, mom? He just didn't, and so even in my house with only 3 kids, it was hard to figure out sometimes. So I just want to acknowledge, it is hard work what we're asking teachers to do. And sometimes one game isn't going to be able to cover all the bases, and just being really transparent with students around. So for me, one of the things that I think I've been successful in, both as a teacher and then as a teacher of teachers, is we are each going to practice different things, and you're going to find some games that work really well for you, but I'm going to ask you to push into some games that don't feel quite as comfortable. And that discomfort, we're all going to feel a little uncomfortable at times. So I know because I'm a basketball player, if you throw a basketball out on the floor, I'm going to feel super comfortable. But I'm also intentional now as an adult about running. I hate running. I ran a cross last night, not because I like running, but because I want to remember what the discomfort feels like. Because I think sometimes it's easy as a teacher to just do the stuff that's comfortable for you. And to forget that there are these other people out there. Like I think about my dad, for whom math is just simple. Like calculus for him is the easiest thing. But one of the reasons my father was my favorite teacher ever, and he was a math teacher for 44 years, is my dad started with the assumption that math is not easy for everyone. And I'm not just going to explain it in one way, I'm going to explain it in 4 or 5 ways, and you pick the way that works best for you. I think that's our role as teachers, is to realize that if we're going to do one game, it may not work for every kid, and just to acknowledge that up front, that this may not work so well for you, but I'm going to ask you to push in and be a little uncomfortable today, because there's going to come a time when we do the game that absolutely works for you, and that's really life. There's not a job that I've ever had, and I've worked in a lot of places that I love all the time. And that's part of life too. And I think gaming becomes that great way to have those conversations and to ask both ourselves and our students to push through times when it's not always fun. Games are not always fun. But it's pushing through and getting to the other side and finishing sometimes has an incredible reward.
So it also is about intentionally teaching students how to create a safe space, because it turns out human beings aren't automatically good at being kind to one another. And so one of the lessons that I have written down for myself about games is that if I'm giving a prize for victory, and I often do, and it's usually some stupid pun that if we're conquering an area and simulating that, then I'm going to turn some Maurices upside down and give out crowns for victory. I'm also going to be giving out a prize for sportsmanship, and I'm going to intentionally describe to my 6th graders what that looks like and what behaviors I am looking for, and whether that is inviting others to be included, whether that is making sure everyone has time to participate or sharing their airtime. I'm going to be describing explicitly what behaviors I want to see in that safe space, and then rewarding it. That might go to the team that wins, it might go to the team that loses. It is always my call. Oftentimes it goes to the team that wins. They have to pick another team that they saw demonstrating those things. But realizing that we as educators, the subject matter we are teaching is only a portion of what we are actually teaching. That we are teaching human beings how to be better human beings.
Also, just to piggyback on Jared there, another cool thing to do is give them the rubric. These are the things that I'm looking for, and then let the students select one of their own. Gives them some buy-in, and that's pretty cool.
So I think that's going to be a pretty good segue to what we do every year, which is take a significant chunk of the time and get questions from you guys. A lot of you are educators, a lot of you are parents, a lot of you probably have practical, how do I do this tomorrow? Questions that we can help answer. So before we do that, I'd like to thank our panel. Thank you. What's that? And we've already got people lining up at the microphone. So hello, you're our first question.
So I want to explore sort of the gray scale of what you mean by voluntary, right? So there's fortnight, right? And at what point is the game, is there an example, a good example of an education being fully voluntary, which is doing you know, make examples of that, or is that sort of a legal type thing that's on the edge?
So when I was talking about voluntary, the ones I can think of in my classroom, like the ones that I have just, like I personally have designed for my history class, I usually get 95 to 100% of the kids voluntary participation. It's something that they really want to do. I had a student who had left our middle school, gone into the high school, who came back because they had a younger sibling coming back, and they were telling me, Mr. Ford, I never really wanted to study for your test because I didn't care about it, but I really wanted to win that game, so I accidentally ended up getting an A in your class. So there is that choice in there, and when we talk about published games like Fortnite, there's always that choice there. But really, I was speaking towards the more educational focused games that I have designed. Did that answer your question?
I have a very simple but maybe strange question. How do you sell this to parents? How do you sell to parents what many people perceive as just slacking off, playing a game? Is this why you are going to school? How do you sell this to parents?
So I will say that I got a whole lot of crap from my own teacher colleagues when I was playing games with my students. But when the test scores came out and my kids killed it, there was no explanation needed. And for example, in my community, I spent my whole career in Title I schools where school was not, most people thought of these kids as not wanting to come to school. I had kids who were riding their bikes 10 miles to get to school every day. And their parents were so excited that they were excited to be in my class that it didn't really matter. It was not tough to sell it because number one, their grades were good, their test scores proved that they were actually learning something, and their kids were happy to be at school. I don't know a parent, especially if, and I'm a middle school teacher too, I don't know if a middle school parent will be upset if their kids are really happy every day going to school and they're passing the same test. So, you gotta make sure that kids are learning. But to have your own children loving learning, I think is a really powerful thing. So if you're just playing games and there's no outcomes, that's problematic. But I think if you're clear about your outcomes and kids are actually learning through games, I've never had a problem with parents.
Yeah, it's not necessarily about the sale. Games are a medium through which curriculum is delivered, just as direct instruction is a medium through which the curriculum is delivered. As long as you have your stated goals, and it's just like any other lesson plan. It just looks more like group work.
Okay, so the question I had is, I like to use Marathon as a middle school teacher. The problem I usually have is trying trying to get their staff buy-in because they want us to do a lot of CFAs with our own team. And so how do you work around that? How do you get the staff members buy-in? When admins work with the staff members in their department. So how do you work around that?
So you invite them to do so. A lot of times we are doing things like a CFA for those people who don't speak all of the education acronyms in the room is a common formative assessment. It is something that staff or the teachers are going to use to figure out like where are we now, and we're going to do it in our teacher group of teaching the same thing to figure out how our kids are doing. And a lot of times, maybe I'm working with somebody who doesn't have the passion that I have for games, and that is teacher flexibility. We might say in our PLC, our professional learning community, that this is the date that we're going to have this common assessment, and I know in my class, we're going to prepare for it this way, and another teacher might prepare for it another way, and there's teacher flexibility in there. Let's see what the results are. And I know that some of the games that I run require a gamer background, somebody who's been gaming for a long time, to be able to get them to run smoothly and well. And I don't need my colleagues to be doing the same thing. I would certainly coach them to do so. But if we're all going to the same point, let's see what's working. So I offer that invitation. I have other things, but it doesn't necessarily always have to be the same path to get to the end result.
Thank you.
This is a little Tom. Hi. Okay. I was curious what your thoughts are on teaching games as the content. So what I mean by that is like taking a video game, a board game, whatever, and teaching it as text, or teaching it to get a point across like a nonlinear narrative, or how, culpability on the player's part affects, their reactions to it or whatever. Do you guys have any recommendations on that?
I love that. I think anytime, I think about a translation of that for me, I'll never forget, Usher came out with a song, I was teaching French immersion, and a girl was singing in the hallway, and I was like, well, stop. I want you to write those words down and then come back and say them to me. And she wrote the words down, and she came back and said, Miss Jones, I can't say them out loud. I said, yeah, that's exactly. And so I started using text from music to have students, I think the same thing is possible with games, right? To talk about even the content of games, or the difference between a board game and a video game. And really, and as someone who taught English or taught about media, my husband is a high school English teacher too, we do a lot around, the different elements of social media and what is our responsibility, how do we be accountable users. So I think that in anything, you could leverage that. What level do you teach?
Right now I'm a student teacher, so I'm currently with 8th graders, and last semester I was with juniors, so we'll see what I end up where I end up, but I'm doing English.
I totally think there are ones, I think you could look at the standards, and I think you could easily find standards that would align with unpacking even the content of a particular game. So I think that's a really exciting idea.
I think that one of the challenges that you're going to find, and there certainly are ways around this, is a lot of what happens in a classroom for looking at text is based on shared experience. And so with the different levels of access different students have, that if you can have that experience in class, or give it something that the students can take home, but if you're trying to I would love at some point to be able to teach something about the Stanley Parable in class and talk about unpacking that. But finding a way to give my students equity of access so it is a shared experience that we can collectively talk about is a big challenge. So there are board games or things that you can come in and talk about. I know that there's a teacher in my district that uses Settlers of Catan to talk about resource management. That's something that they can play in class and have that shared experience to talk about. It's a puzzle and a challenge.
Yeah, that's totally something I'm struggling with, but there was a game panel yesterday, and person said, reach out to developers, and you'd be surprised, how much they really know. Thanks.
And that's absolutely true. Developers do want to help. can't see a game of Puerto Rico being less or related than some of the movies that might be shown alongside that subject. You want to get a sense of what trade and that economy was like, and still immersing yourself.
And the other thing is, especially in a class that's going to be going on all year, those games do create those shared experiences. So that's like a baseline for what you can do, moving forward, as well as building on those relationships.
I hope this is a viable question for this, but I've been an educator for about 11 years now. I have a master's degree in game-based learning and curriculum design and games. I've done about 7 curriculums, over 100 lesson plans with games that exist. I use the scale incredible in every one of my classes. I'm looking, honestly, though, to branch outside of being an educator. I want to take teaching games and what you guys are talking about right now outside of the panels and PAX. I would like to turn this kind of more in my career than being an educator. And I was curious if you had any suggestions on where I would go to help promote game-based learning, game-based curriculum design, and be able to help sell that to parents and to people.
We have a former panelist who was here our first year. His name is Andrew Miller. He's done some of that. Is a book called, I believe it's Freedom to Fail. And he's done some project-based learning. He's teaching over in Shanghai now. But he wrote a lot of articles on Edutopia and started doing some consulting work and some professional development around that. So I think that he's followed that path at least a little bit. I think he's doing something slightly different now, but has, I think you're forging a trail that not many have gone before.
I think there's some motions within various universities to explore that space, though. Most universities are starting to teach game design as a program. The University of Washington, they have a certificate program right now in game design, taught by some excellent game designers and educators. The idea of games as an educational tool, as a vocation, like those 3 circles forming a Venn diagram may not have a center overlap yet, but man, the circles are getting closer in academia at least. So I can make, if you want to talk to me afterwards, I can at least put you in contact with some of the people running that program, because I'm sure they would love to have you be a part of that conversation. Yes?
Do you have, any specific experience with how certain types of games might work with certain types of subject matter, say humanities versus mathematics? So, for instance, I personally teach languages and literature. You mentioned you done some immersion work. I'm curious. I tend to teach more junior high school level, where immersion, younger kids learn language very naturally, but older students not so great. And I want to avoid language drills. But then on the literature side of things, I also want them to, get meaning out of text. And I'm not quite sure how to gamify those sorts of things without making them really rote and kind of fun for everybody.
Well, that's where, for me, I taught French immersion for a long time, which is, for those of you who are not familiar, every subject in French, I didn't speak a word of English for 3 years. Just tu, nous sommes, vous êtes, ils sont, elles sont. That gets really boring, right? But what I did is, when we gamified that, we gamified ER verbs and RE verbs, and the students then, as they were moving, got to kind of use that instead of just going down the road and memorizing. They had a game that was causing them to have to use it in context, and so I think for the humanities, board games for me were really phenomenal. And kids sometimes would take pieces of text and they, we were using really simple text in middle school to do French immersion because these kids have never heard French before they came to me. So I had to figure out, how do I not use baby French books? And so my students actually created their own literature. And so sometimes I gamified things, and sometimes kids were writing their own songs, so we used a lot of music too. And then they wrote their own text. So that allowed it to not be baby. The language may have been juvenile, but the content of the book was more aligned with a 12 or 13-year-old. And so I think there are lots of ways to especially with world language, because I think, well, I grew up in the Netherlands where we have to speak 3 languages to graduate from high school. You know, Americans, when they say, I speak Spanish, me llamo Aaron, uno, dos, tres. So often in the United States, we teach language by rote memorization, and that's not actually how people learn language. It's not how little children do. And I think gamifying and having kids sing and create their own text is more how we teach language to our babies anyway, than the rest of our children. So I think anything that you do with your own child, we should be doing at school. And instead of these textbooks and we have kids writing French before they can even speak it, which makes they never have a 2-word writing anything, right? We have them reading and listening. So just think about how would you teach a small child. So I think language courses and humanities absolutely align, I think, with gaming. But it takes, we've had to move out of kind of the American public school model of working through a textbook and memorizing things. And I think gamifying makes much more sense, and it allows students to engage with language in a more authentic way than how we typically teach. Thank you.
Last year at PAX, there was a card game called Japanese, the game. And I haven't played it, I don't know how well it plays, but it purported to teach you to read Japanese by playing the game. It might be something you want to take a look at their mechanics. I don't know a whole lot about it, except I stopped by their booth and this is a really cool idea.
All right, I just got the 5-minute warning. I'm also getting a shrug. Does the shrug mean you don't actually need us to go anywhere? We can hang out for a little bit?
Yeah, if minutes, there's no more panels after you.
Okay then. Let's make sure we get everyone's questions, and I want to give people a chance to deliver a couple of thoughtful closing remarks.
Hi, how do you encourage students that didn't really have a safe space to game as they grew up?
Well, that's all about setting up your classroom on day one, making sure that your classroom itself is a safe space. And, not necessarily, well, depending on, knowing your students. So sometimes the appropriate thing to do when a student is out of line is to call that student out. Sometimes that's the last thing you want to do. I mean, it's just a part of knowing, it's the art and science of teaching, right? Creating a space where, not being a jerk is encouraged. And then, and it builds slowly from day one. You just have to be intentional.
Thank you.
A lot of times I will specifically invite students to my gaming club that might not have had that experience and say, like, you are really interested in fantasy literature and you've never had anyone invite you to play Dungeons and Dragons before, and so I coach kids in my club. Here's how we make people feel inviting. Let's get people in there and you'd be surprised how often an invitation gets people interested in something.
I love to disrupt narrative. So when people hear I'm a baller and I was the dungeon master at my middle school, that kind of freaks people out. But I love disrupting narratives. And really, for some kids, I think a lot about the black male athletes that I've worked with in my career. They see that Dungeons and Dragons as that's a white kid, nerdy white kid game. I live to disrupt those narratives. And I do. I live to disrupt narratives. But really helping kids who not only have a bad experience in gaming, but there are these notions that we have in this country about who gets to play which game, right? The black boy is supposed to be the football player, the basketball player. The nerdy white kid is supposed to be the DM. And I love flipping that on its head. And so I think it's all about relationship. And what is the story that kids are coming with around gaming? And asking those questions. Getting kids up and talking about where we play games. If you have a mom or a dad who, when you lose, kind of beats you up or verbally beats you up, you're probably not going to feel safe right away playing games and losing. And so how do you get to those stories to figure out the why behind how a kid is showing up to play games and making sure that you're really intentional about creating a different kind of space in the classroom?
There's a trap, though. It's not what's being said, but what's not being said. That they did a study a few years ago with a couple of high-performing teams at Google and Amazon and Apple. Just looking at high-performing teams, what makes a high-performing team. And they analyzed these people and they tested them and they looked engineering skills like, and how many years have you been doing this, and how many degrees did you have, and they diced up some of these teams, and they thought, all right, these people seem to have the best qualifications, we'll put them all on a team, and that's going to be a super team. It wasn't. It wasn't at all. And you had these high-performing teams that didn't have a lot of characteristics of individual high performers necessarily. But what they had was a couple of things that were not what the researchers were looking for. One was within the group, what is the highest, the peak, and the average emotional intelligence of the group. Specifically looking at how people are at reading the emotions of others. And the 1A discovery to that was how many women are in the group. It's a positive correlated factor to how well a group performs. Now, part of that is because women on average score better on those particular tests. But what ends up happening in those groups is you have people watching out for the people that are not speaking. You have people acting as emotional traffic cones. And if one person is monopolizing the conversation and another person's kind of doing this, they don't say anything. But if there's anybody in the room that will recognize that person and say, hey, you don't look comfortable. What is your problem with the solution being presented? That helps level the playing field. So when you're talking about creating those spaces and balancing those spaces, listening is the first step. But asking yourself, who isn't speaking is the next. Next question. Sorry, I ran to
So I kind of have two, but they're right to each other. The first is, as a parent, how do I support gaming in the classroom, at school, in the district? And I guess the second is, I'm a game developer with almost 20 years of experience. How do I support gaming in the classroom, and the school, and the district?
But really quick response to that, we need you in our classrooms to tell your story of what you do. Because I think so many kids have no idea what that means. And so I think number one, how could we get you uncut in the classroom more? But there are so many teachers who would love to have you just come share your story so that kids see there's a path to this into a career. So I just add that as a mom of a gamer and someone who's designing games now, he is doing that because I met one of the producers for Minecraft on a plane when I was headed to speak somewhere, and he got to come here for the first time 5 years ago, and that's how he got on the path he's on now. So I think exposure of kids is a really powerful way you can play a role as a parent.
Schools often have career days where we will bring people in from the industry. I know I'm going to have Nick talk a little bit because I convinced him to come to my middle school, and those kids were talking about him for weeks.
Really? Cool. Yeah, a bunch of middle schoolers asking you about all your questionable career decisions for a day really makes you think. I didn't often regret stopping drinking, but no, like, I try not to be that parent. I think you all know who that parent is. I don't want to be that parent, but I have never had a bad reaction as a parent going to the teacher and saying, how can I help? Like, when you tell them how you want to help, that might not work so well. But just asking the question, how can I help? And these are skills that I have, and here are experiences that I've had. Like just an individual conversation with your teacher. Speaking as a parent, just had exactly that question. That has been the most reliable path to success.
Worst case scenario, you gotta know, it's fine, we got other teachers.
If there isn't a game club at that school, volunteer to either run it, find or supply some games for somebody who will, or find some way to get that because there is a desire for it for the students if it doesn't exist. And if it does exist, it's not funded well enough.
Hi, this is an amazing panel. Thank you for running this and taking the extra time to answer some more questions. I am an aspiring game designer, and I'm curious, what are some of the subjects that you think are lacking, or maybe areas where you would need more games used in the classroom?
Well, yeah, so all of them is Yes, true. I was gonna say, as a math instructor, a lot of times it gets bogged down in procedure. And it's like, here's the game where we learn how to distribute. Yeah. But like, I mean, you pretty much get all of them, but I mean, one of the things that, you know, if the content is dry, the game can help more.
I think one of the biggest things that have held back educational games for a really long time is that game designers didn't design them. Like, they were designed by people trying to help, you know, put a cartoon character next to a math problem to solve a specific problem, like parents wanting a game that their kids could play to teach them a subject. But as you're hearing, I hope, there's a lot more appetite within classrooms for intentionally designed games that are not educational in the sense of the educational games of my youth, but are games that are intrinsically fun, that happen to have those moments of discovery. Civ is a great educational game series. You know, that moment in that resource trading game where the kids are like, wait, I don't know anything about that country because we couldn't trade with them. Like, that light bulb moment was so powerful, and you could only get that through kind of that immersive game experience. So I guess what I would say as a fellow game designer who's been playing around this space a little bit too is just design good games that center around a subject that you know is academically relevant. Don't try to dress up math or reading or language in the dressing of the game. Just make a good game and find a teacher to test it with.
On the other side of that, and this is easier in board games, but it makes board game designers switch than it is in digital games. I know a lot of board games are designed with really interesting mechanics, and then a theme is, you play board games, and those pieced it on later and it kind of fit. I would love all sorts of games where that theme is not pieced it on. A lot of things I do in my classroom, I took mechanics from other games and did them for what I need to do as a teacher, because I have things that I need to teach, goals, and without being in that space, it's really difficult for game designers to get that right about what my content is, and even if you get it right, it's changing in 3 years. So, you know, designing games that are theme independent, but are really easy for a teacher to go, here's the questions I need to ask, here's some mechanics I need to do. Now I've got something I can play in my classroom that is tailored to my classroom, and maybe not the one in the next school district. So you ask, and again, this is a hard task, but you ask what's missing, things that are easily tailored for an individual classroom.
I want to jump in. So in education, there's backwards design. You start with your objective goals. You build back the curriculum. In regards to game design, you've got your content, right? The objective is we want to learn this stuff. Well, when you really dive into that content, what sorts of mechanics organically spring up, and that should then drive a game. So then you've got this game where it's super flavorful and the mechanics make sense.
Thank you.
So, how do you guys feel about teaching hidden values or skills within your game? So you mentioned that you reward students for sportsmanship, and that's like a good skill to teach. But when you said that having games be voluntary, so like having co-op versus people that like just playing single player stuff. The co-op is important in working with the team, and so is there a line that cross, or like how do you guys determine that? If that makes sense.
So I think if I'm interpreting your question correctly, like Francesco was saying, every game I'm going to be playing in my classroom, I have an objective for, and often that is an academic objective, and the secondary skills that things like grit or sportsmanship are going to be secondary. There are also times where we are going to be building a classroom community, and that is my primary objective. And I can state that when I go into it. We're not going to play a game just because I want to play a game. It's because I, as an educator, think that's the most efficient route to my objective.
The interactions that will happen when playing the game just naturally lend themselves to that kind of learning as well as community building. It's just, that's how it works.
I think whether you're playing a board game or a video game or, I was a boys basketball coach for 10 years, it's how you play the game too. And I think I'm really explicit with students about, so you may win, but if you have a crappy attitude and you've been mean to the rest of your team, I don't really care that you win, because you actually didn't accomplish all of it. So I think I'm really intentional with my students. Culture will happen or you create it. And so I think right up front, I think really effective teachers are very intentional about the culture they want to create in their classroom. And I was really explicit about that with my students, that compassion is really important to me. Empathy is really important to me. Learning how to embrace difference is really important to me. And so every game was an opportunity to also practice those things. That was never a secret to my students. But they knew in Miss Jones's classroom, this is kind of what she expects, and these are the kinds of things that will come up all the time. Whether we're working on a worksheet and you're cheating on someone else, or whether we're playing a game and you just called somebody a name you shouldn't have. It's always an opportunity to learn not only the content, but how do we play the game of life, which for me is much bigger than any particular individual game we're playing.
I think we're going to take one more question, and then we'll do some closing comments, and then I don't know what's going to happen next.
Thank you.
I get the singular honor of the last question of the last panel. That's exciting. Okay, so I'm curious. It sounds like several of you guys, or maybe all of you, experienced being a dungeon master. I'm curious about D&D and education. I'm an aspiring educator and dungeon master. And is the only space for D&D in the gaming club, or are there ways that you've figured out how to use or choose an objective like building community, or working on your social skills, or your math roles, or whatever, that you can include that role playing or that system? Because it seems so rich, and I haven't seen it used in the classroom like full bore or effectively, I guess.
Well, I mean, if you have, like when I was teaching AP stats, we'd race through the curriculum, and then we just to have some time to review before the AP test. And one of the things I would do is, the first year it was as simple as assign topics to students and then have the students kind of design and deliver a lesson. Now, is that being a DM? But there's a good jumping off point, right? When you say being a DM, I think the core there is that the student is driving. And there are a lot of opportunities for that. Now, if you're talking about specifically, running your own D&DS style thing in the classroom, I don't know anything about that off the top of my head, but I'd be sure as heck happy to help you brainstorm, because that sounds like really exciting.
I mean, one thing to consider is that there's a lot of RPGs out there, and especially in the last 5 years, there are a lot of RPGs for kids out there. I don't know if anyone's played No Thank You Evil. It is a really good time. There are aspects of role playing that you can get into the history games that Jeremy was talking about, in terms of you are playing as the civilization. That's an element of role playing. As improv is role playing. Okay, as soon as you ask someone to take on a role that is different than the person that they inhabit and interact with others as if that were true, you're engaging those layers of thinking. So the dice, I think, are the least important element on the table here. But that element of becoming, of storytelling, of interacting through these rules and regulations, that's fascinating. And I don't think there's a single classroom that couldn't find ways to make that happen.
I have done quite a bit of things with collaborative storytelling, not Dungeons and Dragons specifically. One of the ones that we've done quite a bit, Looney Labs, the people who do Flux, either has or used to have a game called Nanofictionary. It may be out of print. We have done collaborative storytelling in my class using that game. We've done a little bit of other role playing. Some of the, when I'm thinking about balancing what we are getting out of it with what we are putting into it, mechanically complex systems like Dungeons and Dragons in a room of 30 people tend to be a little bit time prohibitive. I'm not saying there isn't a way to do it or you couldn't do it well. I have either not thought of that or I've ruled out based on time.
So is it mostly that you're finding maybe those kids that you want to build those gaming skills or do that thing and you're going to invite them to your gaming club? Because I think that no matter what school I end up in, it's going to be like this same situation, right? Hey, we're doing D&D after school. Let's do something. Or hey, we're going to do these board games after school. And it seems like that's a really rich environment. You can sort of parallel with the classroom, but is that the only space?
So in my history class, the way I have designed the games is that the first game you play is the most mechanically simple, so it is an entry point for every other game. And so the way that it's a hunting and gathering game, and like every game we're going to play, you're in a collaborative group. I'm going to ask you a test question. You guys, the group, are going to try to write it down so that if you know it, you can come with your group. If you didn't know it before, you've heard somebody else say it, you've probably written it down because you're passing it around, and then you're going to hold up the board with the answer. In hunting and gathering, you can choose to hunt, which will either get you 0 or a lot of food. Never been a small python script to do this, or you can gather, which will get you a small amount to slightly larger amount, not nearly as much as hunting, and those are the only choices. So if you have never played a game before, you have those 2 choices to do as well as practicing. And then the next game is going to be slightly more mechanically complex. The next is going to be slightly more mechanically complex until by the end, we get games that I have other people coming into my classroom and just going, wow, because they're talking about these strategic choices that they're making in there as well. So that is one of the ways that over the course of time, I brought non-gamers along with the gamers by giving them that ramp up of mechanical complexity.
So that's one thing that just struck me. I had a student in my class for 3 years who was a DM, and I didn't know the gaming group, but he was part of the gaming group. And he was a kid, also probably on the spectrum, not super competitive in a lot of ways, but because I knew he was a DM, I knew that he could manage his people well. And so I would intentionally put him in charge of some classroom activities and allow him to use those DM skills to be the teacher or facilitator of our class sometimes. Because I knew that he knew how to manage really complex strategies and how to manage people really well. And so I told him that. I've watched you be the DM, I've watched how engaged you are there, so I want you to translate those skills, and I want you to help me teach the class today. And that young man, to be able to be in charge of the class was really cool for him. And it's something he was really good at, but no one had ever seen him in that way. And he hadn't seen himself in that way. He thought only when it comes to Dungeons and Dragons. But when he was able to speak, he became so much more invested in my classroom because of that. So, yeah, we didn't do Dungeons and Dragons in class, but I used the skills that I knew he had to have because I was a DM. I was like, oh, we can translate that over, and you're now, as a 6th grader, going to be in charge of the 20 kids in the classroom. And just this play went on in him, and I would say he was more invested in the next 2 years because of that experience. And so I think there's a parallel there too.
Also, thank you, Stranger Things. More kids than I've ever seen before interested in Dungeons and Dragons.
It's a magical time to live in.
It really is. All right, we are 18 minutes of magical time over. Thank you guys for sticking with us. One more chance to leave you some parting wisdom, and then we can get back to it.
And this is a little bit of a tangent, not really, I'll keep it short, but I really think that a lot of what goes wrong with kids in school, what gets kids to check out, is kids feeling as though they're not cared about or that they are a product. And one of the, I mean, it's the golden rule when you're dealing with a student, right? Remember that they are a human. And one of the cool things that having this atmosphere where you create this safe gaming space, one of the things it does is it makes for a connected learner that feels involved and has a reason to go to school.
Final thoughts. We often talk about giving students the freedom to fail, and that's one of the things that games are good at. If you're an educator in this room and you're starting on this journey, do not forget to give yourself the freedom to fail as well. A lot of the games that I was trying in my classroom didn't work very well or at all the first time I did them. I didn't have a lot of the expertise to do them well, even if they were well designed. So give yourself the freedom to fail and the freedom to get better at that as well.
I think just piggybacking off of what he said, it's really important to understand that it is a process and there's not like one thing that's going to make it all make sense. It's really important to give yourself the opportunity to learn. It's important to know your classroom too.
So I now am a consultant and I do school assemblies, mostly in the state of Washington, but I spoke to 150,000 kids this year. It's a lot of kids. But I think I was telling them before, I think the thing that I saw more widespread, 3 kids that I've spoken to this year committed suicide this year. Kids are online all the time. They're not face to face. They don't know how to talk to each other. And so I'm all about video games, and I love social media. But I think the physical board games and sitting across the table from each other and having to make eye contact and losing in the presence of someone else and winning in the presence of someone else, I think we have an opportunity as a country right now, whether it's kids or adults. We've got this opportunity right now to face one another. And I think the answers for our nation right now are facing one another. It's not on social media. I call people fem warriors. We are fem warriors. Like we're willing to say things online we would never say to someone's face. And I think that's part of the danger of where we are. So I think games offer this opportunity to be in the presence of someone and to share an experience. And getting back to the community of who are we as people, I think is why I love this idea so much. Thank you.
If you like this panel, please email PAX. We would love to come back and do this again next year. The more feedback they get from people who were here, the more likely it is they get to put that check, yes, you're on the schedule next year. So contact them. If you would like one of the Pitch Storm cards about their Kickstarter, I told them I would pass them out because I mentioned their game here. They are on the 6th floor, if that is still open. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, guys.